What brought us to such a point? What led us here? Let's go back. The year was 2020, the year of COVID, the year of lockdown, and a year of an election. In November, the presidential election between two candidates, Donald Trump and Joe Biden. The country votes in Joe Biden, but half of the country doesn't believe that the votes were counted correctly. They believe there was fraud involved, and it took days for votes to come in from certain states. And then ballots were changing at midnight. One side would be winning, then boom, the opposing side would get more votes, like 80 million votes. And so the election lasted a long while. In the end, Joe Biden was elected president of the United States. But that portion of America that doesn't believe that it was a free and fair election are angry. But it's not yet that the nation will explode into January 6th, 2021. Weeks are passing. Christmas comes and goes. The nation is entering a new era. A new president will be ruling the nation in January. January 6th. A meeting of government on January 6th in Washington, D.C. was to see and validate these votes. And all of this was too much for a portion of the country. But it was unthinkable what was about to happen in Washington, D.C. The president at the time, the current ruling president, not president-elect, Donald Trump, was giving a speech and hoped to make a peaceful protest. And then something happened. Agents of the government began to whip up the crowd. And then the crowd did something that could only be considered an act of violence. They began to chunk rocks and enter the buildings of power. The people that day wanted to be heard, and they knew that the only way to be heard at that point was to do the same violence that had happened earlier in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter riots, or peaceful protests as they were called, and which burnt down and many died. Many children died in those riots and those protests. But everything's about to boil over on January 6th. A rock smashes through it while people are watching their television. One 18-year-old is looking down at his phone, and he's about to witness something that the people who were from the big companies of news agencies would never see or never want the people to see. The events of January 6th from a one point of view of someone actually there. Hoping that there isn't conflict, he began to speak as if the crowd was being riled up. And then it happened. A rock, a sound, a push. The guards began to let many of them through. And then there were some violent parts of this group of people. In the words of the president, not president-elect, and the anger over a lot of horrible things that had happened boiled over that day. Across the nation, capitals are on high alert. Many capitals are having protests just like Washington. It is a siege of the American Republic by its own people. It is an event that would change the nation's path forever. The government then responded, but not before a death of an American veteran who was there at the Capitol, who was shot. And then, less than a year later, her mother was arrested to honor her daughter who was shot. This is what January 6th was. A day of violence, a day of anger, a day of vengeance. But what the rioters did was not evil, is what they would say. But what the people did on the Capitol was evil. Is burning down cities and hurting people the same as January 6th? No. But it is definitely wasn't an attack on America by America. America, a portion of it, was so angry that they decided that there were nowhere to compromise. No way to compromise. And so, fueled on by agents of the government itself that was inside the Capitol, they were let in by the police. And so the show was all propaganda and the actions of fools. Many would be arrested, not even those who caused violence, but those who were just there. Those days, that day, will be ever burned in the minds of a generation and of a nation. Good night.